Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue the story of Diep and James, a journey filled with emotions, loss, hope, and moments that once felt fragile, yet were strong enough to warm an entire long chapter of their lives. That winter arrived more gently than usual. There were no biting winds that cut into the skin, no familiar sense of emptiness that often lingers at the end of the year. Inside the small house, warm yellow lights were turned on early, spreading softly into every familiar corner. Christmas lights wrapped around the window frames, casting gentle reflections on the walls, making the room feel as if time itself had slowed amid the hurried rhythm of the world outside. Diep, James, and little niece spent a complete Christmas together, quiet, simple, yet deeply fulfilling in their own way. Outside the window, snow fell silently. Delicate flakes brushed against the glass before melting away, leaving behind faint traces like winter's breath. Inside the house were niece's soft giggles as James held her in his arms, the familiar sounds of a small kitchen fire, and the gentle clink of bowls touching during a simple dinner. The meal wasn't elaborate, but each dish was carefully prepared, carrying the care and love they shared. The warmth from the table spread through the room, pushing away the cold outside, and the heavy memories of days gone by. James held niece beside the Christmas tree. Multicolored lights reflected on her small face, making her round eyes sparkle with curiosity and delight. She reached out to touch the shimmering ornaments, laughing softly as the lights changed colors. James lowered his gaze to his daughter, the corners of his lips lifting into an unguarded smile. In that moment, he said nothing, yet his eyes held all the tenderness in the world, a sense of completeness he once believed he would never have. Diep stood quietly behind them, watching the father and daughter. She didn't step closer, choosing instead to lean against the doorframe and let the moment unfold naturally. A rare sense of peace slowly spread through her heart, gentle yet profound. Memories of stormy days surfaced, misunderstandings, pain, and moments when continuing forward seemed impossible. After everything, the scene before her felt like a quiet gift from life itself, not grand, not promised, but simply being together, in a space warm enough for their hearts to stop trembling. Amid that warmth, the doorbell suddenly rang, breaking the soft flow of emotion. The sound wasn't urgent, but it was enough to make Diep flinch slightly. James turned, handed niece to Diep, and walked to open the door. As it swung open, a rush of cold air followed, along with snow still clinging to the coats of two familiar guests. Officer Lee and Sam stood there, faces bright, smiles clear despite their breath-forming pale clouds in the winter air. In their hands was a small, neatly wrapped gift, with a carefully placed invitation card resting on top, as though it had been prepared long in advance for this very moment. Without many words, Lee and Sam's presence made the house feel fuller, warmer. Diep took the card and slowly opened it. Her eyes paused for a few seconds, as if she needed time to absorb the meaning of the words inside. Then suddenly, she laughed, a light, genuine, and relieved laugh. It was Lee and Sam's wedding invitation. A simple piece of good news, yet enough to make the room brighten once again. James stepped closer and gently squeezed Diep's hand. Their eyes met, no explanation needed. In that moment, they understood that happiness did not belong to them alone. Those who had walked beside them, shared their struggles, and endured difficult days together were now touching something beautiful as well. And in that quiet winter, joy continued to spread, slowly but steadily, like the warmth that quietly enveloped their small home. When Lee and Sam left, the door closed softly behind them, leaving a delicate hush in its wake. The room returned to stillness, filled only with the steady ticking of the wall clock and the familiar warmth quietly settling over the space. Yellow light spilled across the floor, stretching overlapping shadows that made everything feel slower, gentler. Diep stepped closer to James and rested her head against his shoulder, saying little. Her voice was soft, nearly blending into the silence, as she admitted she had never imagined a day when everything could feel this peaceful. James didn't respond right away. He tilted his head, lightly resting his cheek against Diep's hair, breathing in deeply as if trying to hold the moment in memory. Old recollections surfaced quietly in his mind, misunderstandings that once pulled them apart, losses that were hard to name, and moments when they stood on the edge of letting go, when everything seemed too far gone to return. Yet somehow, all of that now felt distant. James smiled, a faint smile, but one calm and certain enough for Diep to feel. Little Me slept soundly in Diep's arms, her breathing slow and even, her small face unusually serene. James looked at his daughter, then at Diep, realizing they were still here, not in a dream, but in a very real present. Together, with me, with everything they had chosen and stubbornly held on to. No words were needed. They both understood that this trust hadn't come from luck, but had been built through heartbreak, forgiveness, and the choice not to turn away when things were at their hardest. Time passed gently, and soon the wedding day arrived. That morning, soft sunlight stretched across the road leading to the church. The air was fresh and calm, carrying the feeling of a solemn new beginning. Diep and James walked into the church side by side, neither hurried nor slow. Each step echoed against the cool stone floor, blending with the gentle music drifting from inside, naturally quieting the heart. The church was solemn and still. Light filtered through stained glass windows, casting tender patterns across the long wooden pews. Lee stood at the front, neatly composed, though his eyes betrayed his nervous anticipation. When Sam appeared at the end of the aisle, dressed in a wedding gown that was simple yet refined, the entire space seemed to slow by another beat. Her footsteps echoed softly in the warm music, while Lee stood motionless, watching, emotion clearly shining in his eyes. Diep sat beside James, gently tightening her grip on his hand. Her gaze stayed on the aisle, yet inside, a feeling rose that was difficult to name. It wasn't just happiness for Lee and Sam, it was a quiet joy spreading into her own heart. She felt the warmth of James's hand, his steady presence beside her, like a reminder that they, too, had traveled a long road to be able to sit here calmly, witnessing someone else's happiness. The music continued, steady and unassuming, yet enough to fill the space. Each vow was spoken slowly and clearly, as though carefully weighed before being said aloud. Diep leaned lightly against James's shoulder, her eyes softening. In that moment, she realized that some forms of happiness don't need to be named, only quietly felt. And within the solemn space of the church, under the gentle morning light, the emotions in Diep and James continued to unfold, slowly, leaving a long open space for whatever awaited them ahead. The reception that followed was held outdoors, in the garden behind the church. As everyone stepped outside, the space seemed to open up, as if taking a deeper breath. The entire garden was decorated with pure white floral garlands, intertwined with delicate hanging lights and small candles lining the pathways. Soft golden light glowed from above, reflecting off the petals and giving the scene a radiance that felt both bright and gentle, never showy, yet enough to make anyone who entered slow down and take it in. The atmosphere of the celebration was unmistakably intimate. There was no loud music, no long speeches, only overlapping conversations, handshakes, light embraces, and natural laughter drifting through every corner of the garden. Guests gathered around simple wooden tables, modestly arranged. The food wasn't elaborate, but it was carefully prepared, warm in a way that made everyone feel part of a true gathering. A light breeze passed through, carrying the scent of flowers and damp grass, making the evening even more pleasant. James carried little Me in his arms, moving slowly through the garden. She seemed slightly puzzled by the unfamiliar surroundings, yet not afraid, her curious eyes following the twinkling lights around her. James gently adjusted his hold as he walked, pausing now and then to greet familiar faces. When they reached Lee and Sam, he stopped and smiled in congratulations. Sam bent down to look at Nee, her expression instantly softening, while Lee laughed openly, his smile far more relaxed and radiant than the tense composure he'd worn earlier in the church. Diep stood beside James, not stepping forward, simply observing in silence. Her gaze followed every small detail, the way James tilted his head while speaking, the way Lee and Sam stood naturally side by side, as though belonging together had long become second nature. Candlelight reflected on their faces, highlighting joy that needed no concealment. In that moment, Diep realized that no one needed to prove anything, every emotion was present in its truest form. Around them, laughter continued to rise and fall. Some guests raised their glasses in quiet toasts, others shared old memories of Lee and Sam, while some simply listened, smiling along. The atmosphere wasn't overwhelming, instead, it offered a sense of reassurance, as if everyone was exactly where they were meant to be. James glanced toward Diep, catching her gaze resting on Lee and Sam. He said nothing, simply remained by her side, close enough for her to feel his familiar presence. When Lee and Sam stood together at the center of the garden, smiling brightly among their friends, they became the focus without trying to be. There was no stage, no spotlight, yet their happiness spread effortlessly, reaching everyone there. Diep suddenly understood something clearly. True happiness isn't always about what we hold for ourselves, but sometimes about witnessing others living fully in theirs. James gently squeezed Diep's hand, a small gesture, yet enough for both of them to understand. In that garden filled with light and laughter, their emotions were neither loud nor explosive, but settled, deep and enduring. The celebration continued, conversations and smiles flowing on, and the warmth of the evening lingered, leaving behind a soft pause, ready to lead into whatever moments might come next. As the sun gradually set, the outdoor garden slowly shifted in tone. The harsh light of day faded away, leaving behind soft streaks of pale orange and gentle pink stretching across the sky, filtering through the tree canopies and settling onto the lush green grass. The space grew calmer, as if the earlier bustle had quietly stepped back, making room for a pause that felt just right. Diep and James stood side by side, saying nothing at first, simply watching as the garden lights began to glow. One by one, the hanging bulbs were switched on, warm yellow light spreading throughout the space. Flickering candles lining the pathways reflected off glass, white petals, and nearby surfaces, creating a scene more tender and contemplative than it had been during the day. Conversations around them softened, reduced to the occasional distant laugh, blending with the gentle wind moving through the trees. Diep folded her arms loosely and leaned slightly toward James, clearly feeling the peace surrounding them both. James gazed at the scene for a long moment, as if trying to memorize every detail. Then he spoke softly, his voice low and unhurried, saying that he hoped one day they would have a moment like this too, a moment that was simple yet complete, standing beneath the lights, surrounded by loved ones, free from worry or doubt. There was no concrete promise in his words, no clear timeline, just a quiet wish spoken as the heart settled. Diep didn't answer. She turned to look at James briefly, then let her eyes return to the garden as it continued to brighten in the evening darkness. The corner of her lips curved into a faint smile, gentle and unspoken. In her shimmering eyes, there was neither hesitation nor absolute certainty, but a sense of readiness, ready to welcome whatever good might come, in the most natural way. She remained beside James, close enough to feel his familiar presence, calm enough to need no further explanation. James set little knee down on the grass, and she quickly ran back toward Diep, her clear laughter breaking the stillness just as it formed. Diep bent down to catch her, Knee's laughter spreading and blending with the distant lights, warming the space once again. James watched the two of them, his expression softening, standing quietly behind as the moment unfolded on its own. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the garden filled with light. The people gathered together, and the echo of Nee's laughter drifting through the air. There was no climax, no defined ending, only a sense of happiness continuing, quietly yet steadily. What truly mattered still lay ahead, unspoken and undefined, yet enough to make one believe that this story was still moving forward in its own way. And there, beneath the glowing lights of a winter evening, the story of Diep and James gently paused in this moment, leaving an open space for the days to come. Stay tuned for the next episode to see how their story continues, and don't forget to leave your congratulations for Lee and Sam in the comments.
Tạm biệt mọi người. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người video sau. Mãi nghe sách quá mà quên mất luôn.